Mom sent a message. We changed all the locks on the front door and also the gate code. We no longer trust you. I replied, understood. Very smart. But I think you overlooked one thing. Then I canceled the $4,800 mortgage I'd still been paying even after they said my sister deserved the house. 2 days later, their lawyer emailed, "We have a problem. Call immediately." I never did because it was already unraveling. My phone buzzed around noon. I had just gotten out of a meeting and saw the notification. Mom text message. I opened it expecting something neutral, maybe a reminder about a family birthday or some errand she wanted me to run. Instead, it was a blunt paragraph. No hello, no build-up, just a cold, clear message. They changed all the locks on the front door and reset the gate code. And then the line that hit me like a brick. We no longer trust you. I stood there reading it 3 times in a row. My own family, people I'd been helping out financially for over a decade, cutting me off like I was some threat. I didn't even get angry at first. It was more like disbelief settling into quiet clarity. I sat back down in my car and replied with a short message, just 5 words. Understood. Very smart. But I think you overlooked one thing. See, about 8 months earlier, my parents had started pushing this narrative that my sister deserved the house, that she was the one who'd given them grandkids, stayed nearby, helped with groceries here and there. Never mind the fact that I'd been the one covering the mortgage for the past 5 years. $4,800 every month, wired automatically from my account like clockwork. They never once missed a payment because I made sure of that. Even when I lost my job for a bit during the pandemic, I drained savings before letting the house fall behind. But my name was never on the deed. They had some excuse about refinancing being too complicated, and I stupidly let it slide. The shift started gradually. My sister began acting like the place was hers, telling me not to park in her driveway, asking me to call before visiting her home. I brushed it off. Families go through phases. But then my mom started saying things like, she earned the stability, or she's the one who shows up. That stung because they all knew I worked 60-hour weeks and still paid most of their bills, including hers. Then about a week ago, I came by to drop off some paperwork. The gate wouldn't open. My usual code didn't work. I called, no answer. I waited outside for 15 minutes before my sister pulled up behind me, smirked, and told me I wasn't on the approved list anymore. I didn't say anything, just got back in my car and drove off. I kept thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Mom would call. Instead, I got that text, and suddenly it was all very clear. They wanted to lock me out of the house. Their house now, I guess. And they didn't even have the respect to talk to me like a human being. Just a flat statement. You're no longer welcome. So, I opened my laptop, logged into the account, and canceled the monthly $4,800 transfer. The next one wouldn't hit. There was no warning, no explanation. I didn't know them that anymore. I closed the laptop, grabbed a coffee, and went on with my day like nothing happened. They wanted to cut me off. Fine. But they forgot something important. The house they were so desperate to claim was still very much tied to my wallet. 2 days later, I got an email from a law firm I recognized. The subject line just said, "We have a problem. Call immediately." I never did because by then it was already unraveling. The email came in early, time-stamped 7:13 a.m. I saw it while half asleep brushing my teeth. Subject line, "We have a problem. Call immediately." The sender was a local law office my parents had used for years. I didn't open it right away. I knew what it was about. The mortgage I'd been quietly covering was due again, and this time there was no money. They must have thought the payments were automated from a shared account or maybe some kind of hidden inheritance. They had no idea it came from me every month without fail because I never made it about gratitude. I just wanted to make sure they stayed afloat. I didn't even tell them when I got the new job and the raise that made the payments easier. I just kept them going even after they handed everything over to my sister. But now, without me quietly funding their generosity, the walls were starting to crack fast. I got a call from my sister later that afternoon. I didn't answer. Then another from Mom. This one actually left a voicemail, her voice tight with panic. I didn't need to listen to the whole thing to know what she was saying. The mortgage company had contacted them. The payment was missed. And because of how the loan was structured, refinanced a few years back to take advantage of lower rates. It wasn't just a simple late fee. It was tied to an agreement that could trigger a default clause if certain conditions weren't met. They had no savings. That much I knew. Every time there was a holiday, an emergency, or a new car seat for one of my sister's kids, they called me. Every time something broke in the house, the HVAC, the fence, the roof, I paid for it. The moment I stepped back, it was all going to hit them at once. By the end of that second day, I finally opened the email. It was short, a lawyer claiming there had been a serious misunderstanding, asking if I could call to discuss possible arrangements. I closed it without responding. I wasn't being petty. I was done. They'd made it clear they didn't trust me. They locked me out of the house, out of the conversation, out of their lives. But what they failed to consider was that locking me out of the property didn't lock me out of the consequences. You don't get to throw someone out and then turn around and ask them to keep paying the bills. They said, my sister deserved the house. Fine. Let her carry it. Let her learn what $4,800 a month really feels like. Let her explain to her husband why the bank's calling. Let mom explain why the power might be shut off next week if the utilities fall behind, too. I didn't respond to the lawyer. I didn't respond to the calls because deep down they knew exactly what the problem was. And by the time they admitted it, it was already too late. By the third day, the calls stopped being polite. I had 15 missed calls by lunch, mom, dad, my sister, even her husband, who hadn't spoken a full sentence to me in over a year. Voicemails ranged from confused to accusatory, like I'd blindsided them on purpose. But there was no surprise. I hadn't changed anything. They had. I just stopped carrying the weight they quietly dumped on me. I remember driving past the house that afternoon. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But I noticed something new. An unfamiliar car parked out front with a real estate sign tucked in the back seat. It wasn't there the week before, and that's when it clicked. They were planning to sell the house. That was probably the real reason for the sudden lockout. They wanted to make a clean break, stage it, show it, close a deal without the awkward, loose thread of me still walking in with mail or taking care of the lawn. They must have thought they could keep me out quietly while the sale went through, and then maybe throw me a small thank you after the closing, or nothing at all. What they didn't know was that the mortgage still had a balance that reflected my payments, not theirs. They hadn't paid down the principal. They hadn't even touched it. They thought they were sitting on equity, but all they had was debt they didn't understand and a house of cards financed by someone they cut out. I checked the county website just to be sure, and sure enough, the deed had never been transferred. My name wasn't on it, but neither was my sister's. The title was still under my parents', with a hefty lien attached thanks to the refinancing they did 2 years back with my financial backing listed in the mortgage file as an informal guarantor. I had leverage if I wanted it, but I didn't even need to touch it. The real estate sign showed up out front the next morning. Big red lettering. Coming soon. I could only imagine the scramble they were in. Listing a house with a mortgage in default is risky. The kind of thing that scares off serious buyers once they see the paperwork. I knew they'd be calling the bank next, trying to delay, asking for extensions, pretending the payment glitch was a mistake. Meanwhile, their lawyer emailed again. This one longer, mentioning intentions to resolve the disruption amicably. I guess they realized how serious things were, but I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in peace. And finally I had it. They said my sister deserved the house. Fine. She could explain to the mortgage company why she wasn't on the deed, why the payment history was tied to someone who no longer picked up their calls. I sat back and watched quietly. I didn't need to make a scene. The unraveling was doing that for me. All I had to do was let them live in the reality they built. And now they'd have to figure out what it actually meant to own something. By the fourth day, the flood of messages dried up. No more voicemails from mom. No more angry texts from my sister demanding an explanation. No more calls from their lawyer trying to play middleman. Just one final email, short, formal, and carefully worded. We are currently exploring our options and will be in touch. That was all I needed to know. The bank had probably denied their request for a grace period or flagged the account for delinquency. When a house sits on a mortgage that large, lenders don't wait long before taking action. And now that the payments had stopped, reality was setting in. The house wasn't a gift. It wasn't earned. It wasn't inherited. It was a debt they never paid and couldn't maintain. The silence wasn't some passive tactic. It was a reaction to panic, a scramble behind the scenes. Too embarrassed to admit they were in over their heads. Too proud to reach out and say they'd messed up. They thought I'd crack, that I'd panic too, that I'd feel guilty and send the money again just to keep things from falling apart. But I didn't. I just lived my life. For years, I was their silent lifeline, the one they leaned on without acknowledgement, the one who never asked for anything in return. And the moment they decided they didn't need me, decided to cut me out without warning, they also severed the only thing keeping that house afloat. Now they were facing the consequences of that choice, and the quiet that meant they finally understood. They weren't waiting for me to call back anymore. They knew I never would. A week passed. No more emails, no more calls, just total silence, the kind that only happens when people are too ashamed to speak. Then I heard from a mutual family friend, someone who'd been neutral through all of this. She mentioned casually that my parents had put the house on pause. No more showings. The coming soon sign was gone. Apparently, the bank had issued a notice of intent. They were behind now, not just one payment, but two. And with no explanation for how they'd been paying for years with no visible income, the lender was asking questions they couldn't answer. The truth was catching up. My sister had gone quiet too. Her husband, who once bragged about finally owning something real, was suddenly back to applying for second jobs. My mom, who sent that cold message about no longer trusting me, was now asking distant relatives for help. People who had no idea what she'd done or how badly she'd miscalculated. They were embarrassed, not just because of the money, but because of the story unraveling around them. Everyone had believed the version where I was just helping out a little, where my sister had somehow earned the house through emotional currency, while I, the one with the actual financial commitment, was painted as distant or selfish. Now the cracks were public. The utilities started lagging. Word spread that they were trying to borrow money to hold the house a little longer. But there was no one left to lean on because the person they once relied on quietly, consistently, was gone. And I stayed gone. No revenge posts. No dramatic confrontations. Just distance, just quiet, just peace. They said my sister deserved the house. So now she could explain to the bank why no one was paying for it. Me. I moved on. Same city, new place, zero baggage. And for the first time in a long time, everything I paid for was mine. Every key on my ring unlocked a door that welcomed me. Every bill I paid was for a space where I was respected. No locks changed behind my back. No gate codes revoked. No lawyer emails, no guilt, just freedom. And I didn't need anyone's trust to earn it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more real dramatic stories just like this one. Your support helps us keep these coming. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Thanks for watching.